In 1943, artillery crews fired thousands of shells into the sky and hit almost nothing. Enemy aircraft were fast, and timing a shell to explode at the right instant was nearly impossible to calculate in the middle of a battle. Then engineers built something strange, a shell that didn't need a human to time it at all. Inside its nose sat a tiny radio system built to sense when it was close to a target and explode at exactly the right moment on its own. Decades before the transistor existed, a piece of artillery had learned to make its own decision. Most anti-aircraft shells worked on timers. Gunners calculated a target's speed and distance, then set a fuse to detonate after a fixed number of seconds. But aircraft changed speed and direction constantly, and wind shifted the math further. A shell only a few meters off in timing would explode in empty air while the aircraft flew through untouched. Even skilled crews were, in effect, guessing, and against fast-moving targets, guessing rarely worked. What the military needed was a fuse that didn't predict where a target would be, but could sense it directly in real time. The solution sounds almost impossible for its time. Shrink a working radio transmitter and receiver small enough to fit inside an artillery shell. This tiny radio sent a continuous signal as the shell flew. When that signal reflected off a nearby aircraft and bounced back, the shell sensed the change and knew a target was close. No calculation, no timer, just a shell constantly asking one question as it flew: how close am I right now? The moment the answer crossed a threshold, the shell detonated itself, precisely when it had the best chance of doing damage. Building the radio was only half the problem. Surviving the shot was almost as hard. When a shell fires from an artillery gun, it experiences forces of nearly 20,000 times gravity in a fraction of a second, enough to crush ordinary electronics instantly. Engineers had to design vacuum tubes, batteries, and wiring that could survive that violence, then keep working while spinning through the air at high speed. They succeeded. Inside a shell no larger than a bottle, a fragile radio endured a launch that would destroy almost anything else, and kept working. Once deployed, the results were immediate. Anti-aircraft units needed far fewer shells to bring down a single enemy aircraft. Later in the war, against artillery shells fired at ground troops, the same fuse proved just as effective, detonating directly above enemy formations at the exact height that caused the most damage. For the first time, a weapon wasn't just aimed by a person. It was making its own final decision about exactly when to act. For most of the war, this fuse was treated as one of the most closely guarded secrets on either side. Military leaders worried that if a single dud shell was recovered intact, enemy engineers could study it and copy the design. For years, it was used almost exclusively over water and unpopulated areas, specifically so that any shell that failed to detonate would sink or vanish rather than fall into enemy hands. Only later was it cleared for full battlefield use, once the risk of losing the secret mattered less than winning with it. The proximity fuse didn't just win battles. It introduced an idea that never left weapons design again: sensing instead of calculating. Every guided missile that adjusts its course mid-flight, every smart bomb that corrects itself seconds before impact, traces back to the same principle proven in that shell: letting a weapon sense its environment and react, instead of simply following a fixed plan. The next time you see a guided missile adjust its path in the final second before impact, remember where that idea started. Not with a computer chip and not with artificial intelligence, but with a shell small enough to hold in one hand, built to sense the world around it and act without waiting for instructions. The greatest leap wasn't making weapons more powerful. It was giving them the ability to notice what was happening around them and decide for themselves.